Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast. Rich Scheben is back. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Mr. Finelli. How are you doing this morning?
Really well, and it's wonderful to have you back.
Well, it's nice to be back, and I think it really is our duty as Americans to speak up, to not allow this Orwellian reinterpretation of words and news and all this fake everything that goes on by the powers that be. And it's time for the silent majority, all of us, to speak up, to not hedge our bets, or else we won't have any laws. We won't have Bill of Rights. We won't have Constitution. We won't have anything. And the only people who are going to live a decent life are the aristocracy. So what we are doing is fighting for the little guy. And I think at this point in history, it's our duty to stick up for the rule of law, the Constitution, and the little people that has no representation, no restitution under the rule of law. And, I don't look at it. I really appreciate the kind words, Vince, that you've given me over the years, but I don't feel it's anything special because the rule of law has gone to the highest bidder. And as long as we continue to allow all these nightmares to occur where terms like "that's offensive," which is the biggest excuse behavior term in the English language, to break our will and make us submissive, as long as we allow this to happen, we're not going to have a country. And again, I think it's our duty and responsibility to speak up and to read and research and to especially stick up for the little guy. But I appreciate you allowing me to do all my stuff that I have to get ready for the winter when you live off grid and live the way I do, and it's good to be back, and I hope we can make a difference, just because this next year is going to be critical for freedom and liberty for the American people. Vince?
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe after the broadcast, you and I could just hop in the truck and go to the nearest Popeyes. And, assuming the line isn't more than, 2 or 3 miles long, we could get there and, avoid some of the stabbings. And have you seen what's going on? I mean, you're talking about the little guy. The little guy's out of control in some places. These Popeyes customers, for chicken, they want the chicken sandwich. It's $3.99. And so people are getting beat up, stabbed. They cut in line. Cars are around the block. Have you seen this nonsense?
Oh, I have, and that's one of the reasons, as you know, I always like to, especially when I'm gone for a few weeks, I always like to get articles and discuss them even briefly so people can see how far we have fallen from common sense, logic, the rule of law, and how the powers that be are purposely stressing people out because they want to divide us by every group imaginable. And I've said this a million times, they're dividing us by gender, by what gender you identify as, by race, in other words, your shade of skin pigmentation, your sexual orientation, your religion. I mean, they're race baiting here, they're gender baiting here, the generation baiting here. Their job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and even ideology to sway public opinion to hold on to the narrative. And they have to divide us every way possible. That's why they call it identity politics, because they want to make sure that the low-information voter cannot see through the veil of corruption and deception. And all these decades of rewarding mediocrity for getting a job and lowering the bars of expectations and standards has done nothing but destroy America and turned it into a law of diminishing returns. So opportunity is not going to the people who have proven results and qualifications anymore. And I think people are getting fed up. They don't know how to act. There's no civility, especially for people on the left. And we need to basically unveil all these tactics that are used by the aristocracy, which the left so-called Democrat Party is no longer the JFK Democrat Party. They are the bought and paid for party by the elites. And I'm blue in the face, Vince, talking about telling people or asking people or begging people to at least read excerpts from Marx and the Communist Manifesto, from Alinsky, from the Frankfurt School, from Cloward and Piven. We're so drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness that all these government interventions, confiscation, redistribution of wealth through group identity politics, aka victim group status, has basically turned America into unsustainable living. And I think if the power does not go back to the people, and I believe that's what President Trump is trying to do, if the power does not go back to the people, then words like freedom, liberty, goals, dreams, lifestyles will be gone, because you're going to be told what to do, what to say, how to think, who to do it with, etc. And we can do all we can do. I think we're at the end of the road where we're going to go one way or the other. And I think a lot of Americans are realizing that, if we don't fix voter and election fraud, if we don't declassify, and pardon my long-winded answer here, things for the people, not just this FISA warrant fiasco, but Uranium One and the Clinton Foundation, Epstein. James O'Keefe just came out in the last 24 hours. He activates a dead man switch before the release of the Epstein cover-up. Now, there are apparently thousands, if not tens of thousands of elitists who have been to Epstein Island having sex with little kids. And I think most Americans agree that if it's adult mutual consensual sex, no one cares who's heterosexual, homosexual, or this or that, as long as it's adult mutual consensual sex. But when you need stimuli because you've had everything in the world given to you, as most of the elites have, they need to take it to that next level. And if President Trump does not declassify the thousands of elitists who have been part of this pedophile network, I feel that everything will die. And there'll be absolutely no credibility, even for Christianity, because I can't think of a worse crime than destroying the lives of children. But we also need to declassify all this geoengineering and weather modification tools. We need to declassify all the documents related to the Obama administration, the billions of dollars of cash given to Iran. We need to declassify everything about 9/11 and also everything related to alternative energies, because we're at the point where there's so much despair. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Vince, because people, the little people, do not have options anymore. There's no rule of law. There's rule of what group you're in. And as I've mentioned many times about the welfare for the rich, like central banks printing money out of thin air, fractional reserve lending, stock buybacks, we've talked about all this stuff thousands of times. The little guy guy does not have options anymore. Nothing matters. The only thing that matters is what group you come from, whether it be getting a job or keeping a job, whether it be a crime, whether you're the victim or the perp. Nothing matters. It only matters what group you're from, and that's one of the reasons I want to go through these articles sooner than later so we can go off into many tangents and discussions, just to show in these articles, folks, that I came up with, as I do almost every show, is just articles over the past month, some in the last 24 hours, just to show how crazy we have gotten and how the elite have basically force-fed us division, distractions, and have done everything to dumb down the American people at every level, especially public schools. And that's from kindergarten all the way to the highest level in college. So if we do not choose to read and research ourselves, there's no chance, because the elite have our databases. They have our databases on our websites, on Facebook, on our emails. They have all of our databases. And when you choose not to read and research, what happens is they take these databases and they pretend that Joe Smith is actually writing an email to Jane Doe, saying something derogatory about, Pete Jones. And then Jane Doe tells Pete Jones, that's how they do it. They make everybody enemies. They make relatives, friends, coworkers enemies of each other. Because the more division you have, the more control you have. And these people have an addiction to power, money, and control. Vince?
I was kind of smiling at what you're talking about, the groups, depending on what group you're in or what group you come from. So I mentioned this little story. It'll only take a couple seconds, but our son was coming back from a convention, and he checked into a hotel, a nice hotel, and brand name hotel. And he got his room, and he heard this noise. He's going to bed, and there's this noise from the room above him. So he called the front desk, and he said, hey, I need my room changed. And they said, why? I said, well, we got a bunch of homos upstairs, and they're making a lot of noise. And the desk clerk said, you can't know that. You can't know they're homos. And he said, yes, I can. How do you know that? Because one of them said, who's your daddy?
All right. You're cut off. I'm the only one telling jokes anymore, okay?
Well, this is true. This is not a joke. This is absolutely true. So the front desk said, no, we're not doing that. We're not calling those guys up. And my son said, okay, all right. So here's what we're going to do. Either you change my room, or you call those guys up, or when I check out of here tomorrow, I'm going to call my credit card company and have these charges reversed. So the front desk said, yeah, okay, all right, we'll call them up. So they called up, and noise stopped. But you're talking about groups, and it seems like the guys who are making the noise, causing the problems, are protected. They're protected, and we're not. So we have to make noise and use all the tools at our advantage. And that particular tool that got the job done was, I'll just dispute the charge on my credit card because I didn't come here to hear all this noise. And it worked. So, class, that's why I told that story. Rich Scheben and I will be right back. Rich Scheben's with us. And, Rich, I heard for the first time a commercial just now that I'd never heard before on USA Prepares. And it was about moving fraud. And it just goes to show that there's fraud everywhere. And who would think that you'd hire a moving company and they'd be involved in fraud and taking more money than you agreed to pay them? I can't imagine that happening to anybody in my family. So, I'm sure we'd say something like, y'all move that AK-47. Right? Did you pick that up? Or was it the other one? Never mind, I'll go find it. Jeez, Rich, moving fraud. So we have to have a government commercial about protecting people. So, class, you need to pay attention to everything. Back to you.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, look what's happening. Speaking of government fraud, look what's happening with this so-called impeachment whistleblower. Everything's fake theater. Just basically because Trump was getting close to uncovering the Democrat corruption in the Ukraine's manipulation for the 2016 election. Same thing with the Steele and Fusion GPS fake dossier, all the D-class, the pedophiles. This coup has turned America into USSR strategies and processes where they don't even want due process. They don't want hearings. They don't want evidence. They want every meeting to be behind closed doors with armed guards in the basement. See, that's what socialism does. Socialism, fascism, communism, totalitarianism. There's a fine line between all of it. It protects the powers that be, the aristocracy, the deep state, the establishment, whatever term you want to use. And, you have the elite watching each other's back, protecting each other, and using the little guy as a pawn. It could be children, it could be women, it could be blacks, it could be Latinos, it could be poor, middle class, white male heterosexuals with a Christian name. It doesn't matter. They're going to do everything possible to basically delegitimize the system for the benefit of their own power, money, and control. Now, let me talk about some of these articles, Vince, if you don't mind, because, we were talking about different rules for everybody, and as you know, I always try to remember to every broadcast to remember the stand for principle base. This is just a base that every American should adhere to, and that would go a long way with me making us go back to the rule of law and to protect the little people, and that is the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Number two is truth. I mean, why go to school? Why read a book? Why go into Google Books or even look up a word online when half of the terms have been changed for the benefit of dividing and dumbing down and distracting the American people? And of course, the third one could be the most important depending on your perspective. And that is, if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, then you get to do it too. The rule of law is the rule of law. We can't have it especially tiered based on what gender you are or identify as, or what sexual orientation you have, or what is your shade of skin pigmentation. All this does is lower the bars of standards and expectations. It creates a platform for media propaganda, professional wordsmithing, subliminal messages in every show and movie, and Hegelian dialectic. And when you insult the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence of everybody, you degrade and disrespect the individual and the country. You never empower a nation or group by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job, and that's what we've done. And let me share a few articles here. Okay, Justice Thomas says there's a different set of rules for criticizing black conservatives. Well, Justice Thomas, there's a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on everything I just mentioned. Here, sheriff told to tone down your gayness, awarded $20 million. I'm not. For those of you who think that I make these articles up, I don't. It's up to you to look them up. Okay? I want to repeat that. A sheriff was told to tone down his gayness, awarded $20 million. Now, let me tell you what happens when you empower a system that creates a different set of rules, laws, and accountability.
Hold that thought.
You know.
Tell us when we come back. We're going into a break. $20 million for toning down his gayness. Rich, you were talking about a sheriff, and you're talking about how could this be? How could this be? And empowerment. You're talking about empowerment. Please continue.
No, it's not. What it does is the elite are using every group. They're using heterosexuals, homosexuals, women, blacks, Latinos. I mean, for crying out loud, Ilhan Omar said that She said publicly, Latinos cannot compete in a merit-based system. Now, are there any Latinos dumb enough to vote for the Democrat Party when it's so obvious that you are being used to divide and conquer the American people? I just want to mention a few other articles here to basically show how the powers that be are not only dividing us, avoiding synergy, but lowering the bars of standards and expectations based on what group you're in, especially for a job. Here's an article. Nancy Pelosi's daughter slams the New York Times over misogynistic photo of her mom because the photo was a whole-body photo and included her heels and calves. And yes, she was wearing pants. She wasn't even wearing a dress or a skirt. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. I know it sounds like I am. This is beyond Twilight Zone. We're beyond 1984 Orwellian nightmares, okay? This is a war against the American people. Okay, next article. Freshman Democrat Katie Hill resigns amid sex scandal, ethics probe. Well, she said that, it's totally a misogynist thing that it's the men doing it to her. No, it's not the men doing it to her. Men are probably taking photos and videos of themselves having sex with women because 50% of the alleged rapes are false. They're phony. Next article. Katie Hill blames right-wing media for electronic assault leading to her resignation. Again, when you have an obvious elite doing everything to divide the American people, well, this is how we got the Kavanaugh effect, okay? Remember, the Dems called Kavanaugh, our newest justice, a gang rapist. So he's going to basically have a gang rapist reputation for the rest of his life. And many companies and industries are now saying that we should no longer have dinners with female colleagues. This is even including Wall Street. I am reading quotes here. Don't sit next to them on flights. Make sure you book hotel rooms on different floors. Avoid one-on-one meetings. In fact, I'm quoting here, as a wealth advisor put it, just hiring a woman these days is an unknown risk. So, this Me Too era has gotten to the point where it's tearing the American people apart because we are, again, allowing different set of rules, laws, and accountability. And there's so many, I've quoted so many great women who write on this. One is an independent journalist, I believe. Her name is Rachel Tripp, and she talked about patsies for the big government swamp. The goal is to elect the Democrats, and that women are being used and disrespected. I'm highlighting some words that she used. Even Condoleezza Rice said about the Me Too movement that she's worried that women are turned into snowflakes and infants. Infants. That's code for a baby. She says it's backfiring on women. Now, I just got to remind people that history shows when you take down men and divide and conquer nations, their enemies come in and take them over. This has happened many, many times. And combat death is 99.9% male. Work mortality is 94% male. Homicides is 76% male. Suicides are 75% male. So all this male privilege, people have to see that there's no legitimacy or credibility in these arguments. And, when I was trying to get a job with the New York City Fire Department in the late 70s, bench pressing 365 pounds, that was the year that women's group sued because they couldn't pass the physical test. So they sued to lower the bars of standards and expectations. So I got a degree in forestry. I'm making a long story short. It's all in the book. I talked about it in talks and on radios many times. I had a degree in forestry. So I tried to get a job with the National Forest Service. They told me they would not hire me as a white male. They hired two girls sitting in the waiting room, fresh out of high school, with no experience and no education. And when I was working for Big Pharma for about 20-plus years, I tried to go part-time as a job share. They were hiring women left and right all around the country. consulted 30 different attorneys, 30. They told me as a poor and middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name, I did not have enough group self-pity points. Not making this up. Another attorney told me that if I was a female and the same exact thing happened to me, I would have had a $10 million settlement by the end of the day. Now let me give you some examples on when you enable a company, an industry, even a person, just like a parent. If a parent doesn't want to be a parent, have you ever seen what happens when a parent tries to be a friend of their child and the child doesn't get discipline, the child doesn't get goals, the child doesn't get tough love, and the child usually ends up being way worse for it in life, okay? It's just the same thing with companies, with big governments that are out of control. And I was working for GlaxoSmithKline at the time. Well, post-GlaxoSmithKline, when that happened to me, and I'm reading articles. These are published articles in the public domain. GlaxoSmithKline accidentally released 45 liters of concentrated live polio virus in the environment. Drug giant pleads guilty, fined $3 billion for drug marketing. Illegal promotion of some of its products is failure to report safety, and alleged false price reporting is part of the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the United States. So they defrauded Medicare and Medicaid out of billions of dollars. So for those of you on Social Security who are too poor who are on Medicaid, when they run out of money or don't pay your bill, should you go to GlaxoSmithKline or should you knock on the doors of the stockholders of GlaxoSmithKline? I don't know the answer to that. That's why I'm posing the question. Another article. U.S. media blackout. Italian court rules vaccines cause autism. This was a GlaxoSmithKline product. And I'm sure this audience knows that in Canada, the health minister faked a vaccine and they pretended to give her a shot, and it wasn't even a needle in it. So everything is fake, everything is phony, everything is theater, everything is propaganda, lies, false flags, and hoaxes. Another article, Big Pharma criminally no longer a conspiracy theory, bribery, fraud, price fixing, now a matter of public record. GlaxoSmithKline has been fined a whopping $3 billion for bribing doctors, lying to the FDA, and hiding critical trial for fraudulent marketing. Now, folks, the reason why I'm saying this is because when the little people doesn't speak up, because you think or somebody thinks that someone's being a controversial racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorist with a ism on the back of every word or a phobia on the back of every word they can think of or an anti in the front of every word they can think of. That's how they do it. They basically intimidate, threaten, fearmonger, shame you, bribe you to conform. And that's what all this is about, is conforming. But when you enable a company or you enable illegal activities from a government that's overspending or too big or too corrupt or too manipulated, or an individual that's so wealthy that they can basically buy off anyone they want to protect themselves, you enable them. Same thing as a parent who wants to be a friend to their child. When you look at just the despair in this nation, especially from the little people, the suicide rate increasing, the obesity rate, we lose 40,000 people per month from obesity-related diseases. Drug use, meth, opioids, I can go on and on and on. It's because we enable these big companies or corrupt governments or totalitarian regimes, and we are not mobilizing the creativity of patriots, of people who want to help other people. You know, how many times, Vince, have I talked about creating self-sufficiency preparedness schools, chapter 17 in the book? And I'm not
on air or off air? On air or off air?
Both.
Yeah, well, a lot. Obviously, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you are moved into urban, suburban areas, folks, and all you have is the movement of thumbs and technology and not the balance of nature, you are not thinking outside the box, and you're basically being told how to behave, how to act, what to say, and what not to say. You know, have you noticed these questions, Vince, that have been coming out lately? I've been noticing these big time. Things like, stop worrying about others, take care of yourself. Well, how the hell are you supposed to take care of your frickin' self when you don't even have protection rights or restitution under the frickin' law because everybody's bought and paid for? Or how about articles like, some people are showing off and I'm paraphrasing here, folks. People are showing off what they know when they speak or they're on the radio. Well, basically, that's an attack and shaming people on people who want to read and research and speak up. That's what's happening. It's all now propaganda, lies, false flags, and hoaxes. All. There's not even 1% that's legitimate anymore. Everything is for an agenda to control the people. Now, Vince, it's unbelievable to me when they call Donald Trump Nazi and the left calls them Nazis and stuff. Authoritarianism, socialism, communism, tyranny, totalitarianism, dictatorships, fascism. Who wants to control the media and the messages? It's not the left doesn't want the citizen journalists to do it. They want to be able to control the media and the messages. Who wants to control the police? And, well, look what the left has done to liberal towns like Portland. They're letting Antifa go wild. Who wants to eliminate due process? The left or the right? Of course the left. Who wants government schools controlled curriculum and are anti-homeschool? It's the left. Who wants private invasion by police and other strong arms? It's the left. Look, we need to wake up, people, because the so-called Democrats, the lawyers, the judges, they've sold out the American people in the name of so-called justice. It's all fraud. Vince?
Oh, I was thinking about what we were saying about people on the radio showing off their knowledge. I mean, what else would radio be for? You know, Amos and Andy, I guess. Rich Scheben's with us, offgridmontana.com, offgridmontana.com. Rich, you mentioned Katie Hill. And this gal, this millennial from a Democrat, U.S. Congress critter from California, has been in the news as a dope-smoking threesome player, meaning her husband, some other woman, and her. And she writes laws for us, or used to write laws for us until she disgracefully backed out of Congress. And she was annoyed. She was annoyed that she was beat up in the media for her own actions. Things that she did caused her to be a spectacle, a scandal, and she's annoyed that she got caught. That's what's going on in Congress. She deserves it. Now, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, put Katie Hill, a rising Democrat star, on a committee called the Oversight and Reform Committee. Now, this committee is pretty powerful. It has subpoena powers. So she gets put on this, and she's a dope-smoking, threesome-playing, I don't know what else, former Congress critter. I'm glad she's out. I am absolutely delighted she is out of the U.S. Congress. And when you talked about people sharing what they know how to do on the radio, I'm trying to figure out what else is there, Rich Scheben. I mean, I guess that would be the mainstream, right? Made-up news, manipulation of people. That's not what we do. We literally do exactly what we've been accused of doing. That is, I'm talking about USA Prepares, we all volunteer to share what we know to the best of our ability, Monday through Friday, 2 hours a day. That's what we do. We are guilty as charged of sharing what we know.
Yeah. Can I comment on that stuff?
Please do.
Okay, first of all, here's an article, man accused of hate crime for refusing sex with a trans woman. So what this means is a biological man didn't want to have sex with a man who has partially changed into female. So he's being accused of a hate crime. Now, regarding Katie Hill, you know, if it's adult, and you and I think, just so you know, folks, we don't agree on everything. I think we're probably 99.9% agreed on most topics, but there's got to be civility in sex, Vince. And when you're accused of hate crime, or you're raped, or you're tied down, or you're blindfolded, or you're handcuffed, you know, to me, or especially having sex with a child, where I'm reading articles where the number one, the preferred age of most pedophiles is 11 years old. Now, I don't think today's youth can have consensual sex. You know, if they want to experiment with each other or something, you know, there's so much you can do. I mean, the average 11-year-old actually starts watching porn, you know, but this is to sexualize today's youth. Here's an article, School Children Request Sexual Orientation of Kindergarten Students. That's not adult mutual consensual sex. That's sexualizing children. Here's another article. I can't believe we live in a country where parents are allowed to chemically castrate their 7-year-old boy, but spanking the child is abuse. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Children stare up drag queen's miniskirt during drag performer in a public library story hour. This is real stuff. This is very concerning. Elizabeth Warren pledges to crack down on school choice despite sending her own children to elite private schools. So if you're one of the little people and you can't afford to go to a private school like Elizabeth Warren's kid, Elizabeth Warren can tell you to go to school, and you got to be part of the sexual orientation of kindergarten students. You have to watch as a man who shows his junk at a public library under the guise of a so-called protected drag queen, and your kids have to take it and believe it. If you have a parent, or not even a parent, I'm reading articles where children who don't know any better, who want to change their identity and take hormones and steroids and even surgeries and destroy their bodies and their life and their mind, who think it's politically correct to change your identity, parents are actually going to jail and being fined. You know, this, again, civility has to be part of sex. It has to be adult mutual consensual sex. If Katie Hill wants to have threesomes and all that stuff, I don't have any problem with it, as long as adult mutual consensual sex. And leave the frickin' kids alone.
Well, Rich, I got to disagree, because I don't want any twisted, demented degenerate in Congress making laws for me. I don't want that. I don't want that. So, in terms of Katie Hill, good riddance. I'm glad she's out, and I hope she enjoys the tough row that she has to hoe going forward because of her own stupidity. All right, we'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, you mentioned something that I just saw right in front of my eyes or ears during the top of the hour news. You had mentioned something akin to languages changing right in front of us, right before our eyes, and in the news just now. Something, I'm paraphrasing, but this is darn close. Specific invading grasses in California are fire promoters. Let me underline two words, fire promoters. No, they are not fire promoters. Now, they may have a lower combustion temperature, but they don't promote fires. They are just grasses that are combustible. So we are twisting the language right here, right in front of us in the news. And then just to mention, we were talking about Popeyes, the fast, quote, food, unquote, joint, and their chicken sandwich. These GDP are so bent on getting their sandwich that there's this one guy in Florida, Union Park, Florida. He's desperate. He's got to have his chicken sandwich. So he's in line. He's in the drive-thru. It's getting close. Another 5 or 10 minutes, and he'll be there. He'll be able to make his order known. His car breaks down. So what does he do? He pushes his car through the drive-thru. That's the GDP in full bloom. Let's see. Kyle in Montana, welcome. You're on with Rich Scheben and me.
Good morning, Rich and Vince.
Hey, Kyle.
Rich, I've heard you mentioned the civility in the bedroom thing before, but just I've got a little bit. I agree with Vince on this. You probably already know that, but think about reason with me here for just a minute. If that kind of perversion is in somebody's private life, and I call it perversion because it is not the normal. It is not. It is beyond. It is beyond average human. I mean, you do not see this kind of stuff in normal life. But if that kind of perversion is in somebody's bedroom, it has got to have a root somewhere within them, and that root affects every single thing that they do. It's just a fact. I mean, I've asked other people too when I've talked to them about this, were we better off in the 40s and 50s when homosexuality was outlawed? I mean, sure, it was going on. You're not going to stop it, obviously. But were we better off as a country when it was outlawed? Were we better off when women, if they got a divorce, they left with nothing? Instead of enabling them and empowering them to dump their husbands. And I'm not promoting abuse or anything like that. I hate that stuff. But at the same time, I think it's part of that same thing that on one hand, you attack extremely well with this privileged race baiting, all of those kind of areas. But I think this is an area that truly, it's part of, you cannot separate a person's character from their behavior because one is going to influence the other completely in one form or another. Would you not agree?
Well, let me comment on everything you just said. I think one thing, if we actually had a law where government workers, in other words, if you're paid by the taxpayers, if you didn't put into the kitty for a certain fund, okay, you shouldn't be having sex on the job. But what's happening is, let me give you an example, and I'll pick, since you're talking about women and trans and sex and all that, let's look at transgender, okay? Just a few months ago, Kyle, that was considered mental illness, just months ago. So what is happening is, the first thing I'm trying to do is I think the children need to be protected. I think this pedophile network, and not just Jeffrey Epstein was just a small part of it. And this is why this information needs to be declassified for the American people. Because what's happening is, and I'm playing a little 3D chess here. The powers that be are using group identity politics or victim group status or protectionist group status, and they're weaponizing it. And they're lowering the bars of standards and expectations based on what group you're in. Let me just mention a few more articles here. And bear with me, Kyle. Okay? Here's a feminist, and I'm going to quote her. These are articles in the last month since I've been off the air, okay, or the last 2-3 weeks, however long it's been, okay? Quote, by farting louder, the man is using passive-aggressive violence to position himself as dominant. This intimidates the woman to subconsciously not release as much flagellance, as thus the woman, fearing for her safety, doesn't fart as loud as a sign of submissiveness. This is in turn contributes to rape culture and women being oppressed. And I know you think I just made this up. I am not. Here's another article right here. 84% of women are failing the Army combat fitness test. Here's another article right here, and please bear with me, okay? I am just showing you that we are allowing, when we don't have some form of synergy, I do not disagree with you about the ethics or the morals of such a thing. Here's another article right here. A Democrat from Pennsylvania, her name is Wendy Ullman. She just basically said, and I'm quoting, that a miscarriage, an early miscarriage, is just some mess on a napkin. So, again, when we lower the bars of standards and expectations based on what group we're in, we can't control civility. We can't control anything. It's just like, I know you're a big Bible proponent, and I'm gonna dovetail what Vince said about the grass fires. Basically, they're excuses. They're plausible deniability. And, the Bible talks about how unethical even homosexuality is, right? But we got to get to a point, I think where I'm going with all this is if we don't round first base to try to hit a home run, we have to round first base, second base, and third base. And I think there needs to be at least an admission for adult mutual consensual sex. I don't think women should be tied up, should be blindfolded, should be we've gotten to the point where they're weaponizing gender against gender, skin pigmentation shade against skin pigmentation shade, religion against religion, sexual orientation versus sexual orientation. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to hit the ball not out of the park, Kyle. And pardon this analogy. What I'm trying to do is make sure that we get to first base. Because if we don't get to first base, we're not going to get to second base. And that's why I use the term adult mutual consensual sex. Today's the pedophilia thing is so big for people who have so much money that they're literally crying out for stimuli because they've had all the sports cars, all the girls, all the travel, been around the world, all the hotels, all the restaurants. They don't have stimuli that, and they keep taking it to the next level. So I think if we, and this goes back to my definition of standing for principle, we have to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The powers that be are literally holding on to the narrative and swaying public opinion, and how they're dividing us is by saying that we need to have a separate set of rules, laws, and accountability. But we don't. I say, in principle, by definition, we need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability. So I'm not disagreeing with you and Vince. I'm saying that we need to back up. We need to protect kids. We need to declassify all these names. And in the meantime, if it's adult mutual consensual sex and government workers, again, paid by the taxpayers, are not having sex on the job, I think it's a good first base step. And we've gone so far over the deep end, you guys, that sometimes you got to back up a little bit. It's just like, and I know I use Candace Owens as an example so often, but let me just, please hear me out, okay? Because I'm proud of Candace Owens as being a great American, okay? Now, for those of you who don't know her, and I think everybody in this audience does, she is a black female. She's in the neighborhood of like 30 years old-ish. I'm not sure exactly. And this is what I think is a definition of a strong woman, and not these articles that I've mentioned earlier and many times over the air. She was gracious and humble enough to say that she was wrong as being a liberal Democrat. She was forced, and I'm paraphrasing, basically force-fed the notion that because she was black and she was female, that she had to be a victim. And I've given countless examples that people who believe that are being used, they're being played, they're being duped, they're being conned. They're following the elite template, the blueprint, the playbook, the flowchart for destruction of America. The war, if anything, is against the males and doing everything to emasculate masculinity, if you will. So she was intelligent enough to read and research and learn that becoming a Republican should not be an ideology because it protects our freedoms and our liberties. And she had the courage and guts to say, this is a war against men. And that we need to not play this entitled victim group status card all the time, which demands the lowering of the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job. Now, can we talk about that, Kyle, in the context of sex or in the context of anything in lowering the bars of standards? Yes. But if we don't handle first base, we'll never get to second base. And this is why I do that. It's not like I'm conceding that ethics or morals or values or culture, traditions, and heritage don't mean anything. If anything, I say the opposite. But I feel that we've gone so far over the deep end and lowered the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job. I mean, we got to the point that only thing matters what group you come from. And this is why they send, government and big corporate America sends you the sensitivity training. This is why human resources and lawyers and judges have literally sold out the little people, the middle class, and men and masculinity.
I don't think I've been to sensitivity training. Maybe that's the problem. Kyle, can you stay with us? I'd love to hear your comments to Rich's rebuttal. Yeah. Right. All right, we'll be right back. Three of us, USA Prepares instructors. Rich, Kyle, and me. We'll be right back. OffGridMontana.com. That's where you can see some images of Rich and his adventures. And you can buy his book on Amazon.com, One New York Man's Journey to Off-Grid Living in Montana. Kyle's with us. He's calling in from Montana. Kyle, rebuttal, please.
Yeah, I understand your argument, Rich. I really do. And it's quite logical. I really get it, where you're going with it. The thing where I disagree with you is that, in my opinion, your argument, which they are excellent, don't get me wrong, but if you take that moral component out of even your initial argument, it's like adding half the cement to concrete as it needs. It's eventually going to crumble way before it ever gets set up. It's just not going to make it. It's like I would not share my foxhole with a homosexual queer. I just won't do it. I know that the root that's within them is warped, and I'm not willing to put me or my family or my friends at their mercy, knowing that I cannot trust them, because I know innately inside of me that something is wrong inside of them to allow that. I just can't. I can't. That's the part that's the only part in all of what you said. That's the only part in there that I disagree with, that I can think
Kyle,
of right now. But yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Kyle,
let me address that, if I may. Okay, first of all, you're talking about morals now. Okay, so you kind of you were, but you kind of shifted a little more into that subset, a little heavier. Now, we can talk about that all day long. You look at the divorce rate, Kyle, it's between 70 and 75%. And honestly, I'm not trying to put down the Christian community, because I know you are. It's just the fact that the Christian community has the same divorce rate statistics as the regular populace. Now, for people 50 years old and over, divorce is shooting through the moon. So we can talk, and I personally know people. In fact, one of my articles in the book, and please, people don't think I'm pushing the book. I'm not doing that because I don't even know what you're going to get. You could get Godzilla versus Mothra. They've changed the words in my book, and they're even doing it in audio. I mean, the powers that be are truly in a book-burning era. But that being said, I have one story I'll make real quick. This doctor I knew, he married this beautiful woman, and they had a couple kids. While she was having an affair, she wanted to kick the guy out of his house that he owned prior to marriage, and he wouldn't go because he said, I gave my word of honor to witnesses and in front of God. And so she said, well, she went to a judge, and I'm paraphrasing the hell out of the story. I'm making it as short as possible. She told the judge, I think my husband's looking at my child the wrong way, my children. Well, you know what that means, right? Implicating with no evidence, no proof, that he's a pedophile. So basically, he was considered a butthole, and he got kicked out of his house that he owned prior to marriage. He still had to pay the taxes, the mortgage, the insurance, the alimony, the child support, everything. A week after he was forced to move out of his home that he owned prior to marriage, she moved in the guy she was screwing. Well, she was having sex with this guy in certain rooms around the house. The kids saw it. The kids told the father, who was the doctor. The doctor wanted to be a man and do something about it. Well, there was a war on masculinity. So she called the cops on him and did a restraining order, even though he was in the right. And the judge told him, the father, that if you did this again, you would only see your kids under supervision. And basically, she made him out to be this big asshole in town, so he had to change his practice and leave the state. This is the type of stuff that's happening. So if you really want to talk about morals and values and things of that nature, we need to go off into many tangents, because I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree about what you're saying regarding multiple sex partners and homosexual. I'm just saying that we need to look, if you're going to go into the argument of morals, we need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody.
All right, we'll be right back. Rich Scheben's with us. Kyle's with us. And I just have a couple quick comments. So, Willie Clinton, some used to say he was a great president. Oh, he can be a philanderer, he can be a womanizer, and he can be a great president at the same time. To that I say, no, he can't. And he proved that he couldn't. Transgender is a mental illness. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. Anybody who wants to fold, spindle, and mutilate themselves to change their gender or attempt to change their gender has a mental illness. Flatulence, it's just not polite. Loud flatulence in church, that'll turn everybody's head. Everybody will look with disgust at loud flatulence. Whether it be a man or a woman, it's not polite, it's not right. Okay? And I believe homos are selfish. Me first. They exhibit aberrant behavior. And to me, I don't think it's just about sex. I think it's a single thread that runs through their entire behavior.
Absolutely.
How can a homo who says, look at me, I'm twisted, I'm a degenerate, and I'm proud of it, and I want more people to be twisted and degenerates just like me. How can you trust their behavior? And I've had some discussions with some of our instructors here at the farm, and we're talking about trust, and we're talking about, all right, so you've got a guy who is a homo, and you find out, and he's in your little club, and you're trying to defend when everything goes bad, and it's kind of like The Walking Dead, and he's now in your club, in your village, and he's part of it, and what do? Can you trust a person like that? Can you trust him not to try to convince other people to join him and be a degenerate? You know, I look at Ellen DeGenerate as a degenerate. I look at all of these people in the media who are proud of their disgusting behavior as degenerates. Anderson Cooper, I can't watch him. Every time I look at him, I think about his behavior. Whether he's a good journalist or a TV personality, that would be second, third, or fifth. I look at him as a degenerate. I don't want him appearing on my screen. And I'm thinking, maybe I need to have a sign on the gate that says no homos. Now, literally, I know a guy whose child decided that they, and I'm using they incorrectly on purpose because I don't want to say whether it's a male or female, they came home and said, hey, Mom, Dad, guess what? Guess what? I'm a homo. I don't know how I would deal with that other than to say, listen, is there anything you need to take with you because you're out of here, like, right now? No, I'm serious about that because, gentlemen, we are talking about limiting the family bloodline. And to me, it's sacred to every family to continue their bloodline. The Kyles, the Riches, all of us, if we want to have children, we really don't want them to say, you know what, Mom, Dad, it feels so good being with Steve or Bruce or whoever she might be as a homo. And that's so important to feel good right now that they will terminate right then and there. If they're an only child, terminate the bloodline. It's wrong. It disgusts me. We have worked so hard. My grandparents came from Italy. Everything they brought with them fit in one suitcase or one big trunk. That wasn't even a big trunk. My desk that I'm sitting at is way bigger than that trunk right now. And that was everything that the two of them had in there. And they came here and they built, and then my parents built on that from both sides of the Finelli family. They built on that, and then we built on it, and our children built on it. And if one of them said, you know what, I'm done, I'm not going to do it anymore, I'm not going to continue, it's too hard. And besides, I like Steve or Sally, that would put me right over the edge. It's wrong. Homosexuality is wrong, wrong, wrong. And when I look at these Congress parasites, and they want to rule me, and they're doing this, whether it's adult or consensual or not, it's wrong. There's no convincing me. There's no way somebody could say, how about 1 million? How about 2? How about 10? How about 100? How about 1 billion? All you have to do is change your mind. You'll be a billionaire now. I'd still say no. Like, Rich and Kyle, I'm very firm on this, and I have a problem. Because I know a man who I really like, and it happened to him. And what am I going to do? What am I going to do when they say, hey, Vinny, listen, it's really bad out there. Can we come in? I'd like to bring my wife, no problem. I'd like to bring one of my children, no problem. I'd like to bring one of my other children. That's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I got one other thought with you, Rich, and then I'll let you finish up. To a degree, here's 2 points. And again, with either one of them, I am not attacking you, but I'm trying to show how this is kind of embedded in our society. When you were talking earlier to me, you said, I know you're a big Bible believer. That is a type of marginalization that for the sake of an argument. And I think we have to be very careful because the reality is when you say the same laws and accountability for everyone, that's a moral decision. Everything comes back in everything you've said. All of the things that you've come out to at some level, at the basic level, is a moral decision. And it either has to start with the correct moral decision, or you end up in a place eventually right back where we are now, in my opinion.
Hey, Rich, it's your turn.
Oh, pardon me. I had it on mute. Sorry about that. Listen, I'm not disagreeing with everything you're saying, with anything you're saying, okay? Because you've heard me say many times, guys, that I don't believe that people should shove their lifestyles down other people's throats. I mentioned many times that the trans community is probably 1%, if that. The homosexual community is probably 2%, maybe 3%, if that. I always mention many times how there's a war on the family, the mother, the father, the man, the woman, the boy, the girl, and all the linguistics that go through it. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I just think that we have to realize that the powers that be, are we going to win the battle of freedom, of liberty, of taking care of the kids? Because this is all divide and conquer strategies. We're being groomed. These people who do these, whether you call them behaviors or whatever you label it as, they're being groomed to go after the Republicans instead of the corporations that's poisoning themselves. Because there's estrogen mimickers in everything: food, drugs, water, plastic containers holding our food. Now, do I have studies that show what percentage of people might be turned because of all the estrogen mimickers in all of our food, drugs, water, and plastic? No, I do not. But a lot of these people also feel that they need to be recognized. They want to be in a protected group, some type of victim group status. I just think there's more information lying underneath the surface. In the meantime, I would like to get to a point where we have the same rules, laws, and accountability, and not give certain groups victim group status or protectionist group status, like with the hundreds of articles, if not thousands, that I've mentioned over the years, including today. When you lower the bars of standards and expectations based on someone's group, especially if they have some type of victim or protectionist group status, that's what Candace Owens fights against. She says, I am not going to feel entitled anymore because I am a woman or because I'm black, and she admits the war is against males and masculinity. So I'm not disagreeing with you folks. I'm just, with you guys, I'm just going into more subsets and more issues that need to be discussed about this, because regarding things like homosexuality, and Vince, we've talked about this publicly and privately, I don't think that's a winnable argument. No, most people will not disagree. I remember when all this started years ago. I remember a lot of people in the not the heterosexual community, the homosexual community, said you cannot legislate morals. So they agree it is a moral issue. I remember people saying, well, Fox do it, well, coyotes do it, stupid things like that, which has no relevance to it because they didn't know where to go to it. But I just don't think it's a winnable argument. I think 99.9% of this audience will say all this stuff is either mental illness or immoral or against the values of American. I don't think you're going to get an argument in that context. I just think we need to look at a lot of stuff on what the powers that be are doing behind the sign, whether it be biological and chemical, estrogen mimickers screwing people over, whether it be grooming people to go after freedom and liberty, whether it be talking people into signing up for some type of protected group or so they can be recognized. Why are these people shoving their lifestyles down our throat? Because these are divide and conquer strategies. Now, when you talk just about morals, the majority of the people will not disagree with you. I'm bringing up all these other subsets on why they're doing it. And this is why I say right now that as long as they keep doing any of this and bringing kids into the picture, this pedophilia network thing has gotten so big in America and the Western world, and these people are so protected that I don't think when a child goes through these type of experiences, I think that child, whether it be a boy or girl, has 0% chance of having a normal life. And this is why I'm sticking to the first base. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying we need to before we cross home plate, whether you hit a home run or an inside the park home run or somebody RBIs you, you have to cross first, second, and third base before you come over home plate. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that we need to realize other circumstances like the strategies of divide and conquer, like lowering the bars of standards and expectations based on what group you're in, especially for getting a job. Realizing that the war is against males and masculinity and not against females or transgenders or homosexuals or anything.
All right, we'll be right back with Kyle and Rich Scheben. Rich Scheben's with us off-grid Montana. Kyle's with us in Montana. And, gentlemen, I think you're going to find what I'm about to say disturbing. I was talking with one of our boys, and he said, Dad, I don't think you understand. By the age of 15 years old, around here in Missouri, many of the girls are either raped or they were incest victims. There's an absence of morals. By the age of 15, many of the girls are either raped or victims of incest. And he said they're damaged. This is a long-term process to try to fix this. And that reminds me of The Walking Dead. There's a character in there. His name is Negan. And Negan carried a Louisville Slugger. And the business end of that Louisville Slugger was wrapped in barbed wire. That's what comes to mind when I think about these young girls and how they're victims of rape and incest. That's what comes to mind. Now, I'm not recommending that y'all wrap your Louisville Slugger with some barbed wire, but that's what comes to my mind, because I'm afraid I'd be pretty upset if my less than 15-year-old was raped or a victim of incest by some member of the family. I mean, I'd be livid. They'd be hell to pay.
Absolutely. You know, Vince, I got one. I know we're about out of time. I got one other thought for you. So I agree with you, Rich, that the war is against the man in the family. But let's think about why it's against the male in the family. Because the reality is that the man in the home usually sets the standard, the morals, the level of integrity. Everything is done most of the time through or has been throughout history, not now, but has been throughout history. The patriarchal system has been the one thing that held the glue to make things continue and work. And in my opinion, that's the reason. Because they want to throw off those shackles.
I agree, Kyle. Well, let me chime in here. We got a couple seconds left here. That's why I mentioned the divorce rates being 70-75%. The state is now in control of the kids because the state has allowed the system to kick the males out of the house with the divorce rate being so high. And like Vince said about the Missouri girls, that's why I talk about adult mutual consensual sex, because he just mentioned pedophilia and rape, which is not adult mutual consensual sex. So as the system purposely kicks men out of the house, just like the example I mentioned where that wife of that doctor moved into the man's house that he owned prior to marriage, got kicked out of his home. She implied to the judge that he was looking at his kids the wrong way. There was no evidence, no nothing. He got kicked out. A week later, she moved into her boyfriend. They were having sex around the house. So the father tried to be a man. And what did she do? She called the cops, got a restraining order, and the judge said, if you do that again, in other words, if you be the father again responsibly, you are going to see your kids only through supervision. And neither one of you commented on that. I know we're on the same page, guys, but when I mentioned that story, you guys should have been all over it like crap on stink on crap.
Well, I was, and I just told the story about the 15-year-old. and Negan with his baseball bat, his Louisville Slugger, wrapped in barbed wire, he called it Lucille. And what comes to my mind in all of these situations is Lucille. She's the one I keep thinking of.
Yeah.
I think, you know what? I think we're basically 98% on the same page.
Yeah, except I'm a homophobe.
Well,
those guys carry diseases. They carry diseases. You know, if I were invited to one of their houses and they'd say, "Hey, would you like some dip?" I'd say, "No, I appreciate it anyway."
Listen, I don't get it. Okay, I don't get it. You know what most of my friends say? If I was they say, and these are men, they say, if I was a female, I'd be a lesbian. Which basically, that's about as anti-homosexual as you can get from a man's perspective. And they say that tongue-in-cheek to have a joke. I get where you're coming from the moral, ethical standpoint. I'm just telling you that there's other circumstances, like the state and the powers that be have a war on masculinity. This is why I mentioned Candace Owens. I talk about the estrogen mimickers and everything. I talk about divide and conquer strategies. I talk about how these people are groomed instead of going after the corporations that are doing this to them, and they're going after the Republicans who are fighting for freedom and liberty, and the victim group status, the protectionist group status. I talk about all these things, and this is why I say we cannot lower the bars, the standards, and expectations for getting a job, especially getting a job, based on what group you're in. And until we do that, all these things you're talking about will not occur because we got around first base before we slide into home plate.
I can tell you one thing that's not going to happen. No priest is going to hear me in a confessional saying, "Bless me, Father." Well, I got to tell you, done became a homo. That's never going to happen.
Right on. And Rich, I would say this, at every level, if you think about this stuff, it ends up a moral decision at the core.
I don't disagree, but you mentioned priests, Vince. Oh,
yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. Hey, we're out of time, guys. Thank you so much.